What if I told you one of the best debut albums of the hair metal era came from a band that self-destructed before it could even cash the check? BulletBoys had the look, the voice, the riffs, and they blew it all up from the inside. Here's how the Sabotage started before the success even finished.
Like, subscribe, thank you.
Hollywood, 1987. Sunset Strip asphalt melting under platform boots. Egos bigger than the ant. Out of the wreckage of King Cobra came BulletBoys. Teeth bared, hair jacked to the rafters. They weren't subtle. They were not supposed to be. Neon swagger, bulletproof hooks, and a front man who strutted like he owned the block. BulletBoys started with a jailbreak. Mark Torian, Mick Sweeta, Lonnie Vincent had been grinding it out in King Cobra, Carmen Appice's project, not theirs. They wanted something new, not a spin-off or a side hustle. They wanted a clean break. Their own sound, their own look, and their own name on the marquee. So they burned the old maps and went hunting for something that could actually detonate. And then came Jimmy DeAnda, young, hungry, dangerous on a kit. He walked in the room and locked everything into place. But he almost missed the train. The gig nearly went to somebody else. A twist of fate, a lucky break, maybe both. Whatever it was, it sealed the lineup and set the countdown ticking. But Jimmy DeAnda thought he was on the cusp of something bigger with his band Nasty Habit. He heard a sound coming that nobody else did yet. Raw, militant, pre-Rage Against the Machine energy. But dreams don't always pay in gear. BulletBoys manager Dave Kaplan knew the game. DeAnda wasn't going to jump ship for promises, but for a brand new drum kit and a full set of cymbals? Well, that landed. It's amazing what you could get away with drummers. I used to put out Craigslist ads for drummers so I could sample their drum kits, and I'd offer pay, and nobody would take me up on it. So I offered, instead, that I will buy you a pizza, and all of a sudden, everybody came calling. Sorry, drummers, just can't understand you folks. But anyways, DeAnda was in. From there, they locked in like lifers. No Hollywood distractions, no ego trips. Just four guys hammering in a sound 6 to 10 hours a day like they were building a church with their bare hands. And they were starving. No backup plans or side hustles. Mick Sweeta maxed out a gas station credit card just so they could eat. That's where they were at. Empty wallets, full ashtrays, and a pile of riffs they swore would change everything. And no one clocked in anywhere. The band was a job. Every breath, every dime, every scrap of energy went into the songs. Sink or swim, and these guys were already underwater. And they barely had time to break in their stage boots. Just a few shows on the strip, tight, loud, cocky as hell, and the suits came running. Full-blown feeding frenzy. The major labels smelled blood in the water. Warner Brothers won the brawl, and with them came Ted Templeman, the architect of Van Halen's sonic empire. A guy who didn't waste time on maybes. Templeman heard it, and he saw it. The attitude, the swing, the danger. BulletBoys weren't a maybe. They were a bet he was ready to double down on. The Van Halen echoes came fast and loud. Mark Torian hit the stage like a live wire, all strut and scream, Roth without the leash. And Mick, he didn't chase Eddie Van Halen, he met him halfway, all flash and feel, bending notes like they owed him money. Their debut dropped in '88, self-titled, fully loaded. 2 months in a Hollywood studio turned into a heat-seeking missile aimed straight at the charts. It was lean, loud, and mean. Party rock with a steel spine. Every track fully polished. No filler. Just a band kicking the door down with stage boots. Smooth Up In Ya, the first hit. A sledgehammer. And then came For the Love of Money, and everything lit up. It was a cover. And if you ever watch reruns of The Apprentice, you would hear the original For the Love of Money as its theme song. Pretty cool little fun fact. And their cover of the OJ's original was a Ted Templeman call. Total fluke. He caught a rough demo in passing, just background noise in the studio, and he froze. Mick said Templeman clocked in right on the spot, heard the bones of a hit, and saw the whole thing mapped out. And they cut it proper and it detonated, just like he said it would. And that's the thing about Templeman. His gut was gold. The album shot up to number 34 on the Billboard 200, blew past the 500,000 mark, and suddenly BulletBoys were coasting. Big tours, bigger stages, opening for Cheap Trick, Cinderella, arena crowds, screaming fans. For one perfect blink, the whole world looked like it belonged to them. But then the wheels slowed. Not crashed, just dragged. 3 years, an entire lifetime in rock and roll. From the gold glow of their debut to the long, stuttering wait for Freak Show in '91. By then, the temperature had changed. Sunset Strip was cracking, the old guard slipping. Nirvana hadn't hit yet, but the tremors were there. And BulletBoys, they were caught mid-step, aiming for the next peak while the ground started shifting under their boots. The stall wasn't loud, but it was deadly. And inside the machine, the gears were grinding. Sweeta, Vincent, Deanda locked in, chasing a looser, bluesier groove for Freak Show. And the vibe had shifted. More sweat, less spandex. But one voice was missing from the room. Mark Torian, the frontman. Now he was MIA when the real work went down. While the rest shaped the sound, Mark hovered in the sidelines, physically elsewhere, creatively disconnected. Torian wasn't just out of the room, he was out of the fight. Throat surgery benched him first. Nodules sliced out before they could wreck what was left of his range. But that was just the surface wound. The real war was chemical. Rehab followed. Silence followed that. When he battled his own hell, the rest of the band pushed forward without him, building the bones of Freak Show in his absence. When he came back, the tracks were already there. He laid down the vocals, but the shift had already happened. The engine no longer revolved around him. And when Freak Show dropped, it ended up sinking. The shine was gone. The swagger of it felt forced. Critics were shrugging and fans were drifting away. The sexed up lyrics, the slick innuendo, they ruled in 88. By 91, they read like a joke nobody was laughing at anymore. The Tom Waits cover, Hang On St. Christopher, made a little noise, but not enough to pull the weight. The album peaked at 69, barely a blip. For a band that once looked bulletproof, this was the first shot that landed. So if Freak Show tripped, Zaza face planted. Dropped to 93, dead center of the grunge takeover. It completely abandoned the target altogether. BulletBoys had tossed the glam, ditched the riffs, and chased a trend that really didn't want them. What came out was a scrambled mess of half-baked alt-rock, confused, toothless, desperate to blend in with a scene that had already passed them by. There's no edge to it or identity, just a band unraveling in real time, trying to outrun the clock with borrowed shoes. Zaza flopped, and it disappeared. No chart position, no buzz, no pulse, nothing. Singles came and went like they never existed. Warner Brothers took one look at the wreckage and just cut the cord. No meetings, no second chances, just pure radio silence. And that was it for the original lineup. The band that once lit up MTV was now scattered. And the final crack didn't come on stage, it came just before. Dallas, soundcheck, tension so thick you could chew it. And then it snapped. What happened next was pure undiluted rock and roll ego. Raw, loud, and legendary. No fists or gear-smashing tantrums, just a moment so absurd, so perfectly symbolic it etched itself in the band's mythology. And Mick remembered it clear as day. Torian rolled in late, no apology or urgency, and instead of locking in for soundcheck, he lit up the room with a one-man meltdown. He tore into every band doing better than them. Warrant, Skid Row, anyone with a hit and a clean setlist. The rant turned out to be pathetic. What should have been a quick tune-up turned into a front row seat at Mark's grunge parade. Mick Sweeta just stood there watching the train leave the tracks, realizing they weren't a band anymore. They'd become like a hostage situation. And that soundcheck was the end of the line for Mick. No yelling or drama. He just pulled the others aside and dropped it straight and said, I'm done. I'll finish this record. I'll tour it. I'll do the press, but I'm not making another album with this guy. Torian's chaos wasn't a phase. It was the climate. Sweeta had been living in it since day one, running on fumes and diplomacy, patching up explosions just to keep moving. But the tank was empty. The damage control had become the job, and he was finished pretending the music came first. And then came the last twist. So self-destructive it felt scripted. Mark Torian, mid-collapse, picked up the phone and called Warner Brothers himself. Told them to kill the promotion for Zaza. Pull the plug. Let it die. No more videos, no more push, no more anything. And that pretty much clinched it right there. Deanda felt the blast and both walked. That was him and Mick. Classic BulletBoys were done. But for most bands, losing half their lineup is game over. For the BulletBoys, it was just the opening scene of a much messier sequel. Torian and Vincent held on to the name, like a life raft in a hurricane. What followed was a decades-long free fall through lineup roulette, stalled out projects, vanishing members, backstage drama so unhinged, made the early days look tame. But the band never stopped. Whatever it became, it wasn't the BulletBoys that climbed the charts. It was something stranger. They limped back into view in 95 with Acid Monkey, another swing at alt-rock that landed with a thud. The band cracked again, vanished for a beat, and then the late 90s hit, and the BulletBoys name came crawling back, this time dressed up like a supergroup. Steven Adler from Guns N' Roses behind the kit. DJ Ashba on guitar, years before the spotlight found him. For a minute it looked like a resurrection, but the ink had barely dried before it all fell apart. Adler out. Ashba gone. Just another lineup lost to the BulletBoys blender. And by the early 2000s, the wheels were coming off again. Sophie, their fifth album, was supposed to be their comeback. Instead, it became a punchline. A blur of changing faces, burned bridges, Torian spiraling deeper into his own chaos. The band turned into this revolving door with no hinges left. And then came the 2003 tour with LA Guns and Black and Blue. A disaster before it even started. The tour bus broke down, and then broke down again. But Detroit was the real breaking point. Whatever the hell they rolled into that night, it had nothing to do with music. What happened would stain the band forever. Detroit went from a gig to a crime scene. The band's bus turned into a nightmare when their tour manager got stabbed. Details on that one are murky, but Torian claimed the truth unraveled fast. Their driver turned out to be a wanted fugitive on the run for attempted murder, packing a loaded gun the whole time, and nobody knew. Nobody saw it coming. And whatever plans they had for next year crumbled before they could even fake momentum. And 2006 gave the world a front row seat to the chaos. Torian hit a radio show, all confidence and charm, and then dropped the bomb. The original BulletBoys lineup was reuniting. It was a comeback. The words barely left his mouth before the phone lines blew up. It was Jimmy DeAnda calling in live, pissed off. He tore that fantasy apart right then and there. Said Vincent wasn't in, Sweeta wasn't in, and he sure as hell was not in. So it was not a reunion, it was a lie. Live broadcast turned into a public exorcism, and years of bad blood just boiled over right on the airwaves. And the chaos never stopped, neither did Torian. He dragged the BulletBoys name through album after album. 10-Cent Billionaire in 2009, Rocked and Ripped in 2011, Elefante in 2015, From Out of the Skies in 2018. Every record, a different lineup. New faces and old jackets, all orbiting around one constant, Mark Torian. And then came the gut punch. In 2011, former drummer Jimmy Giosa was killed in a car crash. It was a sudden, irreversible loss. And for a band built on noise and fallout, this one hit quiet and it stuck. And then came the unthinkable. Late 2019, after decades of scorched bridges and live radio knife fights, the original four, Torian, Sweeta, Vincent, and DeAnda, announced a reunion. No gimmicks or stand-ins, this was the real deal. They launched it at the Whiskey A Go-Go on December 12th, 2019, home turf, packed house. For the first time in over a quarter century, the classic lineup was back and locked in like nothing ever broke. And they booked over 50 dates. The chemistry was definitely there. The energy was lethal, and for a second, a short, shining second, it looked like the curse had been lifted. Then the universe laughed. March 2020. Just as the engine was roaring, the pandemic slammed the brakes, so the entire tour froze mid-stride. So, no more shows or crowds or momentum, just silence. And in that silence, the old fractures opened back up. And by January 2022, it was done. And it ended the way it always does, with the center caving in. Mick Sweeta went first, no fireworks, just that tired truth. He had to remove all forms of toxicity from his life. DeAnda followed, pulling no punches, calling it a fiasco, said the whole thing was soaked in negativity anyway. And then came the final twist. Lonnie Vincent, the ride or die, the one who stuck by Torian through every lineup implosion and back alley tour, finally walked. He didn't want to be the last one holding the match while the house burned down. Just like that, it was over again. But Mark Torian didn't miss a beat. The second classic lineup flatlined, he rolled out a new version. Fresh faces, same banner. The BulletBoys machine limped forward, powered by one man's refusal to let it die. And because nothing with this band ever stays buried, the strangest twist came late in 2024. Lonnie Vincent came back, again. Back on tour, back in the band, back in the blast radius. The BulletBoys isn't really a rise and fall, it's more of a loop. This never-ending, painful loop. They had the chops, the look, the deal, a gold record out of the gate. Everything pointed to the big leagues. But what followed wasn't a victory lap. It was decades of sabotage, burned bridges, insane luck, both good and bad. Their legacy isn't the debut, it's the records that came after. A band cursed by brilliance and ego. Too volatile to survive and too stubborn to quit. A car crash in slow motion that never really quite stops. To my subscribers, what can I say? You freaking rock. And if you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, reach over and give the subscribe button a good whack, and then reach over and give the like button just as good of a whack. Join the family, and I want to thank you so much for watching.